Welcome to PhD Stories Unfiltered. And I can't believe that we are on the fourth episode already. And this series, as you know, or as you're going to be discovering, that it's all about the raw, the real, and sometimes rough conversations with scholars who are doing PhD or recently completed their PhD around the world. No edits, no pretense, just the truth of doctoral journey. So today we are digging into a topic that sometimes feels mysterious or even intimidating or daunting as it is, and that is publishing during the PhD. How do you get your first academic article out there? What do reviewers really want? And how do you undo rejection? So these are the things we're going to be unpacking today. And to help us break this down, joined by Dr. Kenneth Gyamerah, who is an assistant professor at the Ontario Tech University in Canada. And Kenneth has completed his PhD in education from Queen's University, Kingston, and his MSA as a Achievement Scholar from the University of Bristol. And he is an internationally experienced educator, a researcher, and a policy scholar with over a decade of work across Ghana, England, and Canada. So, one thing I like to do at the beginning of this series, of this discussion, is to ask guests what inspired them to do a PhD. So, Kenneth, what was your inspiration for a PhD?
Thank you very much, Abbas, for having me on this podcast. So, hi to all your listeners. I'm really excited to be here to share my experiences. So, I think I have always wanted to work in the university as a lecturer growing up, but I wasn't really sure about how the journey would go. But after my undergrad, so I did the Bachelor of Education program in Ghana and I became a certified teacher, high school, math and science. And so when I was working in this high school, there were certain systems or there were things that I was navigating as a teacher. And I was always questioning. I believe it all started from this inquiry around questioning things like why can't we do things this way? Why are we always doing things this specific way? Or why are students not exposed to certain opportunities or things that may benefit them? Why do we need to always look at things from one specific lens? So I was like, oh, policymakers. So I came to understand that some of my questions were more around the why things are happening, but then I also saw the role of policy in answering some of these questions. So I'm like, oh, policymakers are very powerful. So I would like to be a policymaker. I would like to be on the table to make those decisions that would support teaching and learning, support students and teachers. So then I decided to do the master's in education policy and international development at Bristol. So when I went to Bristol, I was exposed to different policies, different ways of looking at issues within education. And after the master's, I was like, that's not enough. I think I may need a PhD to solidify my knowledge base. So I think that is what really sparked that interest. Initially, I thought I would just become a policymaker because I was really interested in that. But then I was like, I think a PhD would really help me to learn more about the field from the research point of view. So that, I think, sparked my interest to pursue a doctoral study.
It's been quite a journey since when you had that inspiration of wanting to change, be a policymaker, and then you are now a researcher for policymakers, or you research to inform policies. That's really great. And thank you very much for coming. So, to the business of the day, can you take us back to your first academic publication? What was it about? How did it come to be, if you can remember? And now,
Yes. So, and like you said on this podcast, we tell it as it is. And the goal is also to inspire and encourage others who are in their doctoral journeys about some of these stories that we have. So after my master's, I had a dissertation, a thesis. I tried to publish it. I got rejected. I submitted it to 3 journals. I'll send it to the first one. I sent it to the first one. They reviewed and they were like, oh, unfortunately, this doesn't meet our journal scope, those kind of things. And then I sent it so they will suggest other journals that it may fit.
yeah,
I sent it there. They I think after a month, the editor came again with the same story. I'm like, oh, it appears that I may not be able to publish because
journal for you.
so
I mean, that journal, the second journal also suggested another journal where
they suggested about 3 journals. I'm like, oh, I sent it, same story. And so when I open Lion Francis Porter,
Yeah.
all the papers that you submit to them, you have. So like the first three are rejected and now publish. So I look at it sometimes and I'm like, oh wow, this is where it all began. So I wasn't successful in publishing my thesis, but I was able to send it to conferences. I was able to present it at conferences which were equally good. But then it really demotivated me around this idea of publishing. So I was like, let me focus on my PhD. But then something happened during coursework. So in Canada, in your PhD, the first year you do coursework just like the masters. And I took a policy course that my supervisor was teaching, and then she gave us a group assignment, a paper to do. And so three of us, when we finished that assignment, she was like, I think this is a good paper. You may want to think about improving it and getting it published. I was like, oh, really? She said, yes, she will be happy to give us feedback if we are able to improve upon it. So we did. And then she provided us feedback and we sent it to this journal and it got published. So that was my first publication. And for me, I think when you are taking coursework in a PhD program, it's important to look even at some of the assignments that you produce and use the feedback from the lecturer or the professor to improve it and think about whether that could be submitted. Because for me, so it was a theoretical paper. So that was my first experience. But when I started, the journey wasn't rosy. It was really challenging and it really made me at the point I felt like I'm not sure I might be able to publish. And that one worked and then I became very motivated and confident that, oh, I can publish. So that's how it started for me.
When you said something about when you're on a PhD course or a program, and then there's possibility of writing an article as probably as an assessment for that program, I also had similar experience. My first two book chapters that I published were from a PhD course that I took in Norway, and then a PhD program that I attended in UCL, and then those two programs were able to just came together as group. That one was a co-authored paper. One for UCL was a co-authored book chapter. And the one I did in Norway was a solo article, a book chapter. And luckily for us, it was part of the assignment for that program that we had to write and about 3,000 words. And then the guy said, fine, this is really great. Can you develop this into a book chapter? And he said he's ready to, just like your tutor too said, okay, he's ready to support. And even he proposed a book based on the theme of that course. And then we all submitted and contributed to that book. I have a copy of the book now. So that's one of those avenues where you get to transform idea to publish. Or even when you were not even thinking of publishing, someone would just come around and say, okay, that's really good. Can you flesh it out and make it more convincing as an argument for a book chapter, a paper? So those are the avenues you want to look out for when you're thinking of where should I start from. Good. So now let's start with when should you start? So how early in the PhD years should students begin thinking about publishing? We know there are different pathways to getting a PhD. Some people are by publication and some are by thesis, by monograph. So if you're by publication, you have no choice. You just have to start planning how you want to get those publications out. But then if it is not mandatory for you to publish before your graduation, then it's a different story entirely. Now, I think that's a question that Kenneth is going to be addressing. For those that by regulation, they are not mandated to publish to graduate.
Great question. I think when you are not mandated to publish as part of your PhD, it can be good, but it can also go against you. In my experience, I've seen many doctoral students focusing solely on their thesis, which is great, but I'm like, you need to know what you want to do after the PhD. And for me, the strategy or the planning should begin from year one of the PhD study, because if you want to be in academia, publication is a currency. You need that. And you may not be able to finish the PhD and say, I am trying to pull out papers from your thesis to publish. That might be too late depending on what you want to do, especially currently looking at the global job market when we think about academia. So I think that there may not be the best time to do this, but there could be a right time. For me, the right time is start early, first year. Think about the assignments. Think about the courses that you are taking. Think about the papers that you are submitting. Some of them may be 3,000 words. There are some journals that may accept even commentaries that are 3,000 words. There are some journals too that accept if you read a book and you want to provide a review of the book. I think that for me, that's really important, because then you are able to get something out there that may not be necessarily empirical, but a commentary or a theoretical paper. I think based on my experience, that is what really helped, because I was able to think about, if I want to do empirical study in addition to my doctoral study, that might be a lot, because I would have to go through ethics.
Yeah, of course.
And so, what about the way I'm thinking through theories? Is there any way I can engage them in a more theoretically grounded paper? And then I started looking at scholars in my field.
Yeah.
And I noticed that most scholars who do critical work rarely even do empirical work. They are always theorizing, arguing, or critiquing. So I was like, oh, this may be a way that I could start. So my first paper was a theoretical paper. The second one, too, I think was a theoretical paper. And then there was a book chapter when I attended the conference. I think it was the UK FIET conference in 2022. It was online. But after I think we presented, and afterwards, someone reached out, oh, we were in your session and we are very interested in your topic, and we are actually putting together a book. They are scholars from the University of Cambridge on peace education, but we are interested in decolonizing or African-centered perspectives on peace building.
Yeah.
And so we are like, sure, that's what we presented. So we could modify it and write a book chapter. That was also a theoretical paper. So don't look only at journals. You can look at book chapters. You can look at having a commentary on a book, or having different ways. But if you want to collect data and all of that, that might be a lot, depending on the field that you find yourself. So I think that's one. Two is that it depending on the country you are in, the institution, some supervisors are always working on projects. So being an RA on that project and contributing. In my institution, it is mandatory that when a student contributes to a project, you pay them, but you also publish with them. So I was able to get some papers with my supervisor. That was one. If that opportunity doesn't exist, I think as doctoral students, we need to look for partnerships. We need to look for collaboration. People who are doing similar work, they may not be in the UK, they may be in Nigeria, they may be in Ghana, they may be in Brazil. Looking at those doctoral students who are at the same level with us, they're all figuring this thing together and collaborating with them. So most of my work that I published during the PhD are collaborations, because it was easy to do that. We have three people, we just share. Maybe I would focus on the methodology, another person will focus on the discussion. We were able to do that. And so most of my work were as a result of the fact that I was connecting with other doctoral students doing similar things with similar interests and working with them to get work out there. Luckily, some of them were based in institutions where they were tutors or lecturers, so they were able to get ethics quickly for us to do their work. So figuring out those kind of collaborations, because if you want to publish alone as a doctoral student with so much coursework, thesis work, teaching assistant work, that might not be feasible. So prioritize collaborations. That's what I would say.
I have similar experience working as an RA, getting to be able to be on paper on a conference article with whoever you're working with. And book reviews. I loved book reviews when I was doing my PhD. I got a lot of books through book reviews, because when you write a review, you get a free book from the publisher. And so that was also another incentive for me. Apart from being able to publish a review, you also get a free book, which adds to your library. So that's really a good way to start. And it's about 1,000, 2,000 words. So it's not a very long article that you want to write. And then you can just summarize the book and also key in your own arguments, or you think about what contribution that book is making to the field. And book chapters also is something that you should consider, because in a way it's peer reviewed in a way you guys peer review your work as a publisher, but then it's no journal article where it's very long-winded and you have to do a lot of formatting and all that too. So it's contained, if you like, within a certain argument, and then you are just addressing what you're expected to address in that chapter, so which is sort of limited in scope. I think that's another way of getting started. Those are really good ideas. So let's then look at the process of publishing itself. which is typically a daunting one, especially when you don't have a guide or someone to help you make sense of that journey. So, what does writing process typically look like? From the initial ideation of have an idea for an argument or a theoretical argument, and then to submission, how does it look like? How do you sort of formalize or prepare yourself to go through that process of thinking about an idea, getting it into a draft format, and submission?
So I think I am very organized when it comes to my writing and my work. So I have this folder on my PC that it's more of I vomit ideas. Any thoughts or ideas I have, I put it there and then think about structuring them as potential studies if I'm looking at it from empirical perspective, or looking at if argument that I want to write for a theoretical study. So I have that, and then I'll keep going back to that just to think about how do I formulate them into more researchable or into more publishable ideas. So I try to do that. And sometimes once I get that, I try to also search whether there are scholars or there are studies that have done similar thing, and to think about how do they lay out their argument and all of that. And then think about what can I learn from that and incorporate into what I would want to do. But one thing is that I came to learn because initially I would send a paper, maybe the journal name is very fancy or it's cool. So I have a paper on teacher education policy and there's an education policy journal. I'll just send it there. And then it may not necessarily mean the paper isn't strong, but maybe they are focusing on specific even like countries or context. And so it might get rejected. So one thing that I also do after, even when I have an idea, that's haven't really gone into writing, I start looking for journals. I look for 5 to 7, and then I read about the scope, kind of papers they publish, and even go there to read some articles, even because some journals can be very specific. You need to have these sections. You need to speak to certain audience and all of that. So I will just go and familiarize myself with works that have already been published there. And then when I am thinking about writing, I make sure I outline them. If maybe I make a choice that I'm going with journal A, I try to write to meet that standard. So that's another thing too that I do. I think the writing itself, as you know, is a lot, especially when you are also doing a doctoral study with multiple contract jobs on the side. And so I think that I try as much as possible. This is what I did. I had a formula which was 60-20-20. So 60% of whatever time, maybe within the week, I have Monday to Friday, but then I was literally working every day. Doctoral students, there's no break. But yes, so 60% of my time was focused on my doctoral study, 20% on the RA shapes, TA shapes, those kind of contract jobs that I get as a student. Some of them were tied to my finding, so I still need to do them. And then 20% towards writing articles for publication. So that's also really helped me in terms of how I plan my time on where I am spending my time on. So mostly with my articles, I was writing more on Fridays, Saturdays. And so one thing that I also do is that whenever I'm writing, I try to get my outline first. So the introduction, lit review, theoretical framework or perspective, the methods, discussion, I lay it out and then I start thinking about what are the core or key points that might fall under each of them. I lay them down. It can be a bullet point that I have. And then I use that as a starting point to go and read articles or studies that have done similar thing, and then I use that to structure. I like to write section by section, and for me, my favorite section for any paper is a methodology. I dream to be a methodologist, so maybe that's the reason. So it's like I enjoy doing that, so I always start there, and then I go back to the literature review, and then I go back to discussion, and then I go to introduction, and then the conclusion. So usually that's how I structure my work. And then once that is done, like I said, I already will figure out the journal I'm sending that work to. And so then once that is done, I go there specifically to look at the formatting, because some of them also have specific ways of formatting, citations, and all of that. So I go and check. And also the word count, because most of them maximum 8,000 words for everything. So having that also in mind, knowing that way ahead of time helps me to know I may have to cut out some words, or I may have to be very concise, very on point. And so I think that is how I have been able to navigate that. In terms of, I don't know if there will be a follow-up question with back and forth that happens with journals. But for now, I would like to land here. And then if you have any follow-up, I would go.
Yes, certainly. I think you've really laid it out clearly, that process of even journal selection, deciding what journal you want to publish in. And that should not be an afterthought. In most cases, it's always like that, especially if you are transforming a project report to a publishable journal or article. So you've done a project already, just looking at where it fits in most cases. But if you're starting an idea, starting from the scratch, your thinking is just evolving, then you can start with go to browse the journal you're interested in, how do they fit. And I think what you mentioned is thinking about the aims and the scope of the journal really matters, and how it connects or fits within what you're planning to write or submit to that journal. And that prevents you or your paper from being desk rejected in most cases, because if it doesn't fit directly into what they're interested in, then you just get an editor say just telling you, sorry, you are in the wrong place, you can consider the next door shop. And that's just the usual thing when you are not able to situate show that yes, this article belongs to this journal based on this stuff. So and also reading what has been published in that journal is important as well, to help you frame your argument as well, because you want to know what's the current state of the field based on what these people have written in this journal, and how can I contribute or critique or comment on those things. And see, that's really helpful. So we've also looked at the issue, should you go for a book chapter first, or you should just look for a working paper or book review, or you should go for a journal article straight away. So it depends on where you are and what kind of project you are working on. But if you think as a group, a book chapter might be easier to do, or a working paper might be, or even a blog, an academic blog might be something you want to start with, just to increase your visibility and make sure that you have something to going on as a PhD student. So that's really, so let's now move to the next section, which is on the rejection and the revision and how you manage the feedback from reviewers. So I'm going to ask you if you can just shed light on how do you deal with rejections. I know that's really, how do you manage rejections or reviewer comments? What helped you sort of develop that resilience to keep going when things don't come? Maybe it could be a major revision or even outright rejection from a desk rejection. How do you sort of deal with that?
I think when it comes to rejection, anyone within doctoral journey or in academia, I think it's not anything strange. I think that rejection is part of the journey. And sometimes the rejections come at a time that we know we put in so much work into a paper, and then it goes and somebody reads it and they think this paper is very terrible, it shouldn't be published. And you're like, oh, with all this effort. So for me, nobody likes to get rejection, even though we have been trained that rejection is part of the journey. But in reality, nobody likes that, because we put in so much work to get to that point, to get that kind of message that, oh, unfortunately, we have received the feedback from 2 reviewers or 3 reviewers, and based on their feedback, the decision is to reject your paper. We wish you all the best. It's not something pleasant, Adam. I think the way I have looked at this is, one, when I receive feedback on a paper and they are saying, oh, this, go and do a major work on it, I'm like, thank you. Maybe you are seeing things that I didn't see. Sometimes when we write, ideas sit in our head, and then we may not even consider our audience. So it's always good for an external person to, in a way, try to think through with us the work that we want to send out there. So sometimes I find it as a helpful way. Sometimes I also serve as a reviewer for others. And so I know, but I also think about it as it is subjective, in the sense that that's the person's perspective about the paper. It doesn't necessarily mean the paper is that bad. So taking it as, okay, for me, feedback is an opportunity for growth. So even if they reject my paper, I still take that feedback, incorporate it, and send it to another journal. There was a paper that I did with my colleagues. It got rejected 2 times, but we reviewed we incorporated all the feedback that we received, and then we sent it to even a better journal that published it. That paper is among my most cited papers. And also, it really made impact in the sense that when we published the paper, the following month, there was an issue in Ghana around the same topic, and they discussed it on TV. They pulled our paper to support the argument. And then we got a call from the education, I think it was from the office of the Minister of Education, that the minister is interested in our paper. So if we can send a pager around what we found and and we did that, and we heard that he took it up. So that way, it was able to influence a policy in Ghana. But in the process, it took us almost over 2 years for that paper to be published because it got rejected in 2 journals. But we didn't give up. So sometimes there have been instances where you receive a journal rejected the paper, you send it to another journal, and they find it really great.
Yeah.
Even in terms of feedback, I have received feedback where one of them will be like, "This is a very excellent paper. This is," and then another the reviewer too will say, "This is a very terrible paper." So it's always subjective. But for me, if you want to grow, feedback should be something that should be part of everything that you do, because you also don't want to send a paper out there that scholars in the field think is not really great. Because think about it this way: in the next 10 years, when you look at the papers you've published today, will you be proud of them? So will you still feel like, oh, I did really great? So I always think about it. If I'm sending a paper out there and it has not been reviewed, I have not received critical feedback on the paper to improve it, I'm still shaking, because someone can write to the journal and say, this paper isn't really. So feedback, it's important. When they reject the paper, it doesn't mean the paper is bad. It means there's an opportunity to improve it and send to another journal. So for me, that's how I have dealt it. But in terms of dealing with reviewers' comments, that's also another thing. Sometimes I get a bit defensive when a reviewer is telling me to do certain things that I think, no, maybe you don't really understand this area of work more than I do. I wrote a paper, and reviewer was asking me to change the theoretical framework I've used. And I'm like, no, the theoretical framework is the heart of my work. The reason was that the reviewer said the framework isn't African-centered. And I was thinking through this work from an African-centered approach to education. And I'm like, no, I guess you may not understand it. This theory is actually grounded in African ideas. And then, so I did not change it. So I think as an author, you have to be firm. Yes, you respect the feedback that they've given, but a reviewer can also get it wrong. So there's always an opportunity to respond to them. And I think when you are able to learn how to do that well, if they ask for certain things and you think it will change the scope of the work, you can respectfully decline that and give a justification why. So I did that. It went, and also I sent an email to the editor and made them know I am an expert in this field. I've done this work for over 5 years, and I've published, and I know all the key scholars in this field. What they is saying, I appreciate that, but I think they didn't get the point well. So I'm just making you aware that I have not changed it, but these are my justification for maintaining that. There has been instances that I have gone on to challenge certain things if I know they may misinterpret what I mean. But most of the time, I respond to them one by one and indicate where I have incorporated those feedback. And I'm always appreciative to them that I appreciate that you've provided. It's also a political game. Academia is politics. So you have to know how to also play it in a way that they may not see you as you are being very defensive. Another thing that I have done is that anytime I receive feedback, I am interested in the editor's decision. Is this a rejection? If it is not a rejection, whether major or revision or I don't care. I know now I have guidance on where to improve the work. So I just close it and then may come to it maybe 2 days after, because sometimes when you read it immediately, you may be very offensive and maybe annoyed. So I just close it and take it off head and then do something else. And then when I'm more calm, I come to it and then I start working on it. So that is how I have dealt with. There's a current paper that one is the reviewer 2. I've done 3 back and forth with them. And it's really interesting. Reviewer 1 says the paper is excellent. They gave me minor feedback. I worked on it. I sent it. Their feedback of, oh, now this is really great. I accept it. Reviewer two said, oh, I have really done great work with incorporating all of that. But there's also something specific that they want me to do. I did it, but that is the third time that this is going back to them. And this is very minor, but they still want it. And most of the time, editors would always listen to the reviewer until the reviewer says accept, they want. So it's also back there. And that also goes on to, in a way, if you're a doctoral student, don't always think about the kill one or tier journals. They are great if you have some of them on your list. But the thing is that journals that are peer reviewed, that's key. Don't publish in a predatory journal. Find journals that are strong, but that may be published in a timely fashion. Because if you want to get some papers out there before you finish your doctoral study, which may be 3 years or 4 years, depending on where you are, then you may have to focus on, let's say, the Q2 or the Q3. It's a journey. You will grow. There will be times that you get more Q1, but now you want to get something out there so that your work will be visible and then you can build on it. So I am very particular also about journals. There are journals that take 2 years, especially those of us in education, it takes forever. So for those ones, I try to look at when they have a special issue.
Yeah, because it goes out quickly.
Yes, but if it's a normal one, I'm reserving them for later, maybe in the next 2 years when I am more settled in my career, that I can wait for 2 years to get a paper out there. But always looking for journals that at least within 6 months you can get feedback to know. So that is also a strategy that I would share. But in terms of reviewer feedback and all of that, it can be a lot, but I see it as an opportunity for growth.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really impressive. I really enjoyed how you've, similar to my experience, so I would exactly say the same thing that you've read out, especially dealing with feedback from reviewers. As reviewers ourselves, we know, well, it's a free job. It's a voluntary act. I mean, when you are sent a journal article and an abstract for a journal that's been sent to the editors, and they're asking you, are you interested? Are you able to review this for us? So you think of, can I meet up with the deadline and all that? So you also want to put that in your plan and then accept or decide if you want to take on that job. And when you take it on, you're reading it, you're writing a report on it. So it's free work, which every one of us has to do to get a system going. So when you get feedback from someone, as Kenneth has mentioned, it's an opportunity for you to improve that work. Whatever the feedback, be it rejected or major revision or minor revision, it's just there for you to improve the quality of that work. And again, you want to be proud of what you put out there because it has your name, it has whatever. But also we know at an early career level, thoughts, our positions to change, so which is fine. So whatever you're thinking now and you want to get out there, just get a peer-reviewed journal, as Kenneth mentioned, and then you get the proper mentoring, and the experience matters. Again, the experience of knowing what's the process of publishing, how do you get to upload your revision, how do you respond to comments, and those cultural ethos of publishing, the daily principles of publishing, you will learn that if you are in it. But you can't learn that from outside. If you are scared of getting into it, that's where you don't even get to know about anything going on there. So until you get into the process, you won't be able to say, this is how I can be better, how I can better position my work and myself as a scholar. So it's really important. Put your feet in the water and get started with that first one. And again, it doesn't have to be Q1, high impact, just try and get something decent and get going. So that's really interesting. My other question is it better to co-author with your supervisor or write solo? I know that it depends on a lot of things. If you're working with them, it might be a mandatory thing to do. But as early career researchers, where do you want to be in terms of how much of solo work and how much of co-author paper do you think is important? And then we then go on to the next question on other things that we might want to reflect on.
I think the question about whether as early career scholar you co-author with supervisor, especially during a doctoral study. I think, for instance, in the US and Canada, those in STEM, engineering, life, that those who do more of lab work, there's a guideline around co-authorship that any work that comes, even if it is yours, it is coming from the lab. So people would support you to do that. So their system is different. Those of us in social sciences and education, it might be institutional. In my institution where I did my PhD, there wasn't anything like you have to publish with your supervisor or co-author with them. I did not co-author with my supervisor on my personal projects, but I've co-authored with them on their projects that I supported. And for me, I'm always grateful to my supervisor. There were some papers that came from her project that she made me take a lead. I was the first author, even though it was a grant. Everyone has that kind of opportunity, but I think that helped me. But I think that if the person doesn't have connections to other doctoral scholars in other parts of the country for them to collaborate, I think it might be helpful that even if you have an idea that you want to start discussing with your supervisor for feedback and guidance, and maybe politely asking them whether they may be interested in contributing to that. The goal is that if it is your first paper, you need that mentorship. Like you said, how to even write the cover letter, how to bind the papers and all of that. Those cultural, institutional aspect of publishing, these are things that you might not know if you are not in it, like you said. So if you are co-authoring with a mentor like your supervisor, they will show you how to do it. So that is what I find as a great asset if you are thinking about doing that with a supervisor. It's always great because then they might also contribute to the paper one, and also they would also review your sessions and make them better before it even goes out. There were some papers that my supervisor was not part of, but I shared it with them. Oh, this is a paper that I'm doing. Can you give me feedback if you have time? And she did. And I think it really strengthened the paper before it even went for peer review. So that is one. In terms of sole authorship, I think it's really challenging. I've seen a lot of even senior scholars, and about 80% of their work are collaborations because we cannot work in silos. Writing a paper alone takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of dedication because you are the person doing everything. So, depending on where you are in your doctoral journey, you may think about, I would reserve my doctoral study for maybe sole authorship, or I would look at book chapters and those kind of things for my sole authorship. And then maybe for journal article, that may be more words, like 8,000 words and all of that, because you may be very busy with your thesis and other things, collaborating with one or two people. I don't like to collaborate with more than 4 people because sometimes it's not equitable in terms of the work. And so I prefer 1 or 2 or 3 maximum. And I think that is also a process of learning because you co-learn, you create that space for yourself, because some of these skills that you gain, even collaborating with people and all of that, you would need it when you become a professor because you are always collaborating on people on grants. So I think for me, the focus should not mostly be around having sole author. If you're able to have it, it's good, but it's good that at least you have 1 or 2 or even 1. If you target publishing 4 papers in your PhD, maybe 1 of them should be sole, and then the 3 might be co-authorship. When you want to get a job, they understand that you are a doctoral student, so there's not that big expectation that all your papers should be solo. So you need to find that kind of balance, but at least get 1 solo authored paper out if you are able to do that before you graduate.
That's brilliant. And I like the idea that you have to learn, and the process of learning is through you working together with a senior colleague. And I also realized, through the process of collaborating, is that it's good to send out your draft to someone within your department or within your faculty to just have a look at it and give you a critical review, a critical commentary on that draft before sending it out. And that reduces the rate of rejection you get, because someone that looked at it, someone who might, in fact, be the person to review it in the end, that looked at it and they've said, okay, this is your strength and this is the strength of this paper and this is how you can improve it. So I think that's also one hack you want to hold on to before you send out. Try to send it in before you send out, so that helps you get to know what they feel like from someone out of writing process. Good. Now let's look at critical reflections on the publishing. And we know, as you said, publishing industry is political. We have the geopolitics of knowledge production everywhere, and then we see where more money is where you have more journals, and some so-called international journals are not so international. So they're international in India. Sometimes you send out a paper and they ask you, that's too focused or too issues around the politics of knowledge production, and issues like race or even topic of interests. Also, if you're not writing what people are writing, or you are writing something different or disruptive in a way, and it doesn't align with what or the ideology of the journal. Some journals are also ideological in a way too. So you have to read these things properly as well to know where and what's all right. So I want you to think from your experience. Have you had any issue where you had to consider issues of geography or institutional affiliation or even race, or in understanding how these issues affect publishing opportunities in international journals? Have you?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's really true when we think about geopolitically and even thinking through. For me, I do work on decolonizing education, indigenizing education, and some of these ideas are informed by my positionality as someone who's African, someone who understands some of these things, not just theoretically, but also personally. And I have an understanding that there's a concentration of journals, usually in Europe and North America. And sometimes there could be that kind of political around submitting work from the global south, for instance, and the possibility of they published, because their work is not strong, but because of where they are located. So yeah, it has been an experience that I submitted a paper to a journal that they do comparative work or they do international work, and then submitting work from a specific contest, and they're like, oh yes, this is great, but it's looking at only one contest. It wants an international contest. So just like what you said, so it makes it difficult, especially for colleagues in the global south or in other to get work published just because you name the country. I have a colleague who even though this colleague located in the global north, some of their initial papers were getting very negative feedback. He's a very excellent scholar. But because his work was focusing specifically on an African country most of the time, because that's where his work was based.
Yeah.
And so most of the time there could even be things around, oh, check the grammar or give the study to a native speaker. Those things come up from people who review, and I'm like, nah, that's didn't be like, yeah, some of those things come up as soon as they see this work is located somewhere. There are those kind of biases. So when we think about democratizing publications and all of that, we also need to think about this idea of knowledge is counted as valid and whose voices are always there. And you might see people in the global north who don't really have any strong community within the global south going there to collect data and publishing easily because of their social location and the privilege that may come even in terms of institutionally. I think strategically, I have been encouraging my colleagues who are in the global south interested in publishing to understand some of these things and say, that's why it's also important that you collaborate. That may be like, doesn't address the issue. It's an epistemic issue, which I think needs to be addressed, and editors and journals need to be more informed about these things. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But as a system, you also need this work. So in really encouraging them, there's a need for you to collaborate with people in different so that you might be able to push some of these ideas out. And it has worked for some people, depending also on the field. Like I've seen a lot of my colleagues who are working in the global south in health, like there's a lot of work out there. Those of us in education, it might be tricky. It's always that tension around like kind of thing. So when I reflect upon all these things, I come back to say our publication landscape needs to be decolonized. We need to really think about how we publish and all of that. But then we also need to find ways in which we can strengthen partnerships in a way that there are so much opportunities that we may get from learning from other voices that are unheard. So finding ways in which we engage multiple perspectives, especially from contexts that do not often get featured in journals and in works that we do. That's what I can say. But I have found that even in terms of your title, like you move from being like a PhD student to, let's say, to be like a doctor and working in academia, your work tends to, even though they do it as a blind review, but I don't know, but in some ways, in some shapes or forms, your work tends to get some positive feedback or positive acceptance in a way. You don't know why it's like that. But for instance, it comes to special issues. Now I target them more because they are more specific and I know it can go really fast. When I send an abstract to a special issue, if I'm sending to like, there's high possibility that 4 of them will say yes to me. Now, and it might be because of my job. Now I'm a professor, my institution, and where it's based. I'm not saying just that, but that could also be a currency or a capital that comes with that. My is important, but I think there's a privilege that some of us also enjoy because of where we locate ourselves. So that's like the crucial points thing that I think we all need to reflect upon and think about how we are also opening spaces in a way for those voices that might never get featured in some of these journals to get it in.
About how you're able to balance the currency or the capital of your epistemic or social location. So depending on how you might be located in the global north and researching the global south, or located in the south, researching the south. So depending on where you are, you need to find a way of navigating that geopolitics and collaboration. In cases transcends or trumps those, and you're able to. So now let's end a couple of points, and I want you to just three practical things that you think PhD students can do now to start building a publication record. What is that? Three things you say, okay, now go out there and start this.
Okay, I would say first, know what you want to do after your PhD. If you are thinking about staying in academia, then know that publication is a capital and focus on the basics. Don't look at big things. Look at even the assignments you are writing. Look at the literature reviews that you are even writing for your dissertation and think about it this way. Can I improve this? Can I send this to my professor or a senior colleague to provide feedback and help me turn it into a theoretical paper or a chapter? Think about it that way. Think about something. So that's first. Second is think about need to be realistic. How many papers would you be able to get completed in addition to your dissertation? Because you focus too much on publications and your dissertation suffers, you may stay so long in the program. So find that balance and think about how many papers do you hope to publish by the 3 years or by the 4 years or by the next 2 years, and think about who can support you in getting this work done. If you are thinking about a certain paper, you may think that collaboration helps me to get this done in a more efficient way or going solo. Think about it. So I think that is the second thing that I would say. Very strategic about this. And I think the third thing is that rejection is part of the journey. Don't be scared to put your ideas out there. History has made us aware that those prolific scholars, their work that have shaped methodologies, theories, and all of that came in their early stages of their and they keep building on that same idea and improving. So don't be scared of publishing. If some of us have been able to do it, you can. Start, like try it. It might not be a rejection. It might be your first one goes there and they publish it. I have many colleagues, their first articles that they send, they published. They didn't get any rejection. So your story can also be different. But what I want to encourage you is that if you don't do it, you have zero. But if you do it, you may have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. So start early. Don't wait and say, I will publish from my thesis, so I'm waiting or I'm focusing on my thesis. It's important. But then what happens? Think about it this way. At the end of your PhD, you want to be in academia and you are an unpublished scholar. There'll be extra pressure on you to get work out there. But then this also take time. Like in education, it takes like a year or more to get a work out there. So if you start early, it helps you to at least get some work out there before you graduate. Don't think about quantity, think about quality. You may have 3 papers that are really strong and solid that could give you the job than, let's say, people who have 10 or 15 publishing in predatory journals. People reviewing your work will know, and that's something you'll be proud of in 10 years. Think about quality. Don't think so much about quantity. So that's what I would like to share with.
That's more than three things. It's quite a lot, and it's a brilliant summary of what we've discussed today. And thank you very much, Kenneth. So I have this quick fire session that I normally do. Probably in the next 1 minute we'll be done with it. So it's a quiz, and I'm going to ask you a question. You don't overthink the question. Just your best guess. So we then that. So are you ready for that? So it's called
I'm ready.
Publish or Perish Edition.
Okay.
So now, which country produces the highest number of academic publications annually?
China.
Yes, that's correct. China. They just recently overtaken the US in their publication record. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And what's harder, writing a paper title or writing a conclusion?
Paper title, I struggle with that a lot.
Okay, of course. Reviewer two, I personally offended every PhD student at least once.
True. Nobody likes reviewer too.
So, which of the following is a major reason articles get desk rejected without peer review? Poor writing or not?
Fit in the journal scope.
We'll discuss that today. And writing in silence or with background
Music. I love to work when there's, especially music. Yeah.
early morning or late night.
Night. I'm not a morning person.
So, what's the longest time you've ever waited for a reviewer feedback? Like, how long had that been?
8 months.
Wow.
So, send the paper. I think I sent the paper in August, and it went to review in August, and then I got the feedback in April. So that might be 8 months, and I'm still sitting with it's like I'm still sitting with the review.
So,
Yeah.
what's that one academic you will co-author with?
Professor, I have a lot of them, but currently Professor George Day,
Yeah.
who is at the University of Toronto. Yeah.
I would love to publish with him as well. Interesting. Okay, good. And the last one, finish this sentence. Publishing is dash. So, what would be a completing sentence? First one.
Oh, publishing is an asset.
Oh, good. And yeah, it's really an important asset. You need it for the rest of your career. I think that's brilliant. So, as we've seen in the course of this series, publishing during your PhD can feel like navigating a maze, trying to figure out what's happening here. But as Kenneth has shown us today, it's about having a strategy, having a community of people you work with, and also persistence, keeping at it regardless of how difficult the process is. And if you're a PhD student wondering when or how to publish your first paper, I hope conversation has given you that clarity and courage to go out there and win. And I will see you on the flip side. Thank you.